I want to tell you about the Tuesday afternoon that broke my life in half. Not a fight. Not a car accident. Not a phone call in the middle of the night that everyone dreads. Just a Tuesday afternoon, a couch cushion, and a phone that wasn't supposed to exist. I'm going to take you through all of it. And I need you to stay with me until the end because what I found on that phone was not what I thought it was. It was so much worse. And then, somehow, it was something else entirely. My name is Daniel. I'm 38 years old. I live in a small city outside of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows your name at the hardware store and the local diner still has a pie case by the register. I work in logistics management. My wife, Rachel, is a school counselor at the middle school 3 miles from our house. We've been married 11 years. We have a daughter named Avery who is 9 and obsessed with horses and graphic novels. By any normal measure, we had a good life. I want you to understand that. I'm not someone who was suspicious by nature. I was not the guy who checked his wife's phone or demanded passwords. I was, if anything, someone who trusted too easily. Rachel used to tease me about it. She said I was the kind of person who would hold the door open for someone robbing the place. She wasn't wrong. We met in our mid-20s at a birthday party for a mutual friend. She was standing in the kitchen eating cold pizza straight from the box and reading the back of a hot sauce bottle. I walked over and said something genuinely stupid about the Scoville scale. She laughed anyway. We talked for 4 hours. I drove her home. I called her the next morning. We were engaged within 2 years. What I'm saying is, I didn't go looking for trouble. Trouble came to me. It was a Wednesday actually. I lied when I said Tuesday. That's how much that day rattled me. I couldn't even hold the day of the week straight for years. It was a Wednesday in early March, that gray waterlogged time of year when Ohio can't decide if it wants to be winter or spring. Avery was at school. Rachel was at work. I had taken the day off because I had a dentist appointment in the morning and a plumber coming in the afternoon to look at a slow drain. The plumber finished up around 2. I paid him, closed the door, and went to the living room to sit down for a few minutes before I had to start thinking about dinner. I dropped onto the couch the way you do when nobody's watching, kinda sideways, half collapsed. And I felt something hard shift under the cushion. I figured it was the TV remote. We were always losing the remote. I reached down and pulled out a phone. It was an iPhone, one of the older models, in a plain black case. Completely unremarkable. And my first thought, honestly, was that it was an old phone of Rachel's that we'd lost during one of our couch cushion avalanche moments. We had both switched phones a couple of times over the years. But when I turned it on, the screen lit up with a passcode prompt. And here's the thing. Rachel and I knew each other's passcodes. We'd always shared them, not out of suspicion but out of practicality. What if one of us is driving and needs the other person to read a text? What if something happens and you need to get into your spouse's phone? We just knew each other's codes. It was a non-issue. So I typed in her code. Wrong passcode. I tried the backup code she sometimes used, her mother's birthday. Wrong passcode. I tried Avery's birthday. Wrong passcode. I sat there holding a phone that my wife apparently had hidden under a couch cushion with a passcode I didn't know, and I felt the floor tilt under me. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies. Just this quiet, horrible gravitational shift. Like something that had been solid was now sand. I put the phone on the coffee table. I stared at it for a while. Then I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink. I came back. The phone was still there. Of course it was still there. Now here's where I need to back up because the phone didn't come out of nowhere. Not really. There had been things. Small things. The kind of things you talk yourself out of noticing because you love someone and you don't want to be that person. About 4 months before, Rachel had started being vague about her schedule. She was a school counselor, so her hours were generally predictable. In by 7:30, home by 4. But there had been evenings, maybe once or twice a month, where she'd text me saying she was staying late for a meeting or grabbing dinner with a colleague. It wasn't alarming on its own. She had those dinners before. But there was a tone to the text. Efficient. Almost clinical. Like she was checking a box. There had been a night in January where she came home and went straight upstairs to shower before she even said hello to Avery. I noticed it. I told myself it was nothing. A hard day at work. School counselors carry a lot. There had been a moment in February, and this is the one I kept coming back to, where I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly and she was on her phone, and she put it face down on the counter before she turned to look at me. Fast. Too fast. The kind of fast that you only do when you're hiding something. Who are you texting? I asked. Just my sister, she said. Her sister lived in Portland. They talked occasionally. It wasn't impossible. I let it go. But these things were in me somewhere. filed away in a part of the brain that keeps records even when you tell it not to. So when I found that second phone, it wasn't like the information landed on empty ground. It landed on all of those moments I had chosen not to examine. And together, in that moment, they formed a shape I didn't want to see. When Rachel came home that evening, Avery was already in the kitchen with me, nominally helping with dinner and mostly stealing shredded cheese. Rachel dropped her bag by the door, hugged Avery, and came over to me and kissed me on the cheek. Normal. Warm. She looked tired in that way she always looked in March, when the kids at the school were hitting their behavioral peaks and the guidance referrals stacked up. I had put the second phone in my jacket pocket in the closet. I couldn't figure out what to do. I felt like if I brought it up right then, in front of Avery, I would blow something up that I might not be able to put back together. And part of me, the cowardly, hopeful part, wanted one more night before whatever came next. So I cooked dinner. We ate. Avery told us about a horse documentary she'd watched in science class even though it had nothing to do with science. Rachel laughed. I laughed. We put Avery to bed. We watched 30 minutes of a show we'd been working through for 3 weeks. And then Rachel said she was tired and went upstairs. I sat in the living room in the dark for a long time. And then I took the phone out of my jacket. I don't know why I tried what I tried next. Maybe desperation. Maybe the particular kind of intuition that comes from 11 years of living with someone. But I typed in the name of Rachel's first childhood dog. The one she talked about when she talked about growing up. The one whose photo was still in a frame in her mother's hallway. The phone opened. And that's when everything changed. The first thing I saw was the message thread at the top of the screen. A name I didn't recognize. A man's name. There were hundreds of messages. My hands were shaking as I scrolled up to where the thread began. I'm going to be honest with you. I read those messages for 45 minutes. I read every single one. And by the time I was done, I felt like I had been standing in one place for 11 years and the ground had just opened under my feet. The messages started about 7 months ago. Rachel and this man, his name was Marcus, were clearly close. Clearly intimate in the emotional sense. She talked to him the way people talk when they feel completely, catastrophically understood. She talked about her fears. About feeling like she was disappearing inside her own life. About a grief she had been carrying that she couldn't explain to me. And there were things she said about our marriage that cut me at the root. That she felt lonely inside it. That she felt unseen. That she loved me but wasn't sure she was in love with me anymore. I read those words and I had to put the phone down and just breathe through my nose for a while. But I wish I could say that was the worst part. I kept reading. About 3 months into the messages, something shifted. Marcus had written to her, "You have to tell him. This isn't fair to him. And it isn't fair to you." And Rachel had written back, "I know. I'm trying to figure out how." Then 2 months after that she wrote to Marcus, "I made an appointment. A therapist. I need to untangle some of this on my own before I blow up everyone's lives." And Marcus had written, "Good. That's the right call." Then about 6 weeks before I found the phone, Rachel had written, "I think I'm figuring out what I need to say to Dan. I think I owe him the truth. I've owed him the truth for a long time." I put the phone on my knee and stared at the dark television across the room. Here is what I had understood and what I had not understood. I had understood that Rachel was in communication with someone I didn't know. I had understood that she had feelings she hadn't shared with me. I had understood that our marriage was in more trouble than I'd known. What I had not understood until that moment was the timeline. Because those last messages, the ones about telling me the truth, about therapy, about figuring out how to talk to me, those were from 6 weeks ago. And in the past 6 weeks I tried to think of whether anything had changed. Whether Rachel had seemed different. And it hit me. She had. She had been different. Quieter in a focused way, not a distant way. She'd started taking longer walks in the evenings, something she said was for her mental health. She'd started coming to bed earlier instead of staying up scrolling. She'd looked at me sometimes at dinner with an expression I'd filed under tired, and now I was reopening the file. She had been working up to something. She was going to tell me. Whatever the truth was, about Marcus, about how she felt, about our marriage, she had been building toward telling me. The appointment with the therapist. The messages about owing me honesty. The change in her over the past few weeks. She had already chosen. I sat in the living room until 2 in the morning. Then I went upstairs and got into bed next to my wife, who was asleep, her hair across the pillow the way it always was. And I didn't sleep at all. In the morning I made coffee. Avery came downstairs first, already talking about horses. Rachel came down a few minutes later and she stopped when she saw my face. "Dan," she said. "What's wrong?" I waited until Avery had gone upstairs to get her backpack. And then I set the second phone on the kitchen counter between us. Rachel looked at it. Her face went very still. Not guilty exactly. More like someone who had been dreading a door opening, and now the door was open and the only thing left was to walk through it. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Since yesterday," I said. "I found it in the couch." She sat down. I sat down across from her. And we talked for the first time in what felt, in retrospect, like years. Not argued. Talk. She told me that she had been struggling for a long time with feelings she didn't understand, a sense of hollowness that she'd been unable to diagnose or explain. She said she had started talking to Marcus, who was a college friend she'd reconnected with online, because he was going through a divorce and she was trying to help him, and somewhere in those conversations she realized she had been pouring her honesty into that friendship because she didn't know how to pour it into our marriage. She said she had never been physically unfaithful. I believed her. I don't know exactly why I believed her, but I did. She said she had been terrified of hurting me. That she'd been in therapy for 2 months trying to build the courage to tell me everything. That she had already ended the friendship with Marcus because her therapist helped her see that she'd been using it as a way to feel something without having to address what was actually broken. "I was going to tell you," she said. "This week. I was going to tell you this week." "I know," I said. "I read the messages." She put her hands over her face. "Not to hide from me, I think. Just because sometimes you need to cover your own face when the weight of something becomes real. Here is the twist. And I need you to understand that this is the part that rewired everything. After Avery left for school, we pulled it together enough to get her out the door, which is one of those unglamorous acts of parenting that nobody talks about. Rachel asked me if I wanted to know one more thing. I said yes. Because whatever else I felt in that moment, I wanted the truth. The whole shape of it. She went upstairs and came back with a folder. Inside the folder were printed documents. Medical documents. 7 months ago, around the time the messages with Marcus had started, Rachel had been diagnosed with early-stage depression and, more significantly, had been told by her doctor that she had a genetic marker associated with a serious neurological condition. Not a death sentence, but a life-altering possibility. A thing that might come or might not come but would hang over her regardless. She had gotten the news alone. In a doctor's office. And she had driven home and not told me. I asked her why. It came out softer than I expected. She said she was afraid. Not of the diagnosis. Afraid of becoming a burden. Afraid that if I knew, I would love her differently, not less maybe but differently. The way you love something. You're already preparing to lose. She said she couldn't stand the thought of me looking at her that way. So she had sealed it inside herself. And that sealing had cracked something open between us, this slow invisible fracture that neither of us had known how to name. Marcus hadn't known about the diagnosis either. He'd just been someone she could talk to without the stakes feeling so impossibly high. I sat there at my kitchen table in my house in Ohio, in the gray early light of a March morning, and I looked at the woman I had married 11 years ago, who had been quietly carrying a terrifying piece of news entirely alone because she loved me too much to let it touch me. And I didn't feel anger. I felt something I am still not sure I have the right word for. A kind of sorrow that is also a kind of love. Grief and tenderness wrapped around each other until they were indistinguishable. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "You should have told me," I said. "I know," she said. "Not because I needed to know," I said. "Because you didn't have to carry it alone." She cried. I cried, which I don't do easily. We sat there in that kitchen for a long time. The coffee got cold. Neither of us touched it. That was 14 months ago now. Rachel and I are still married. That is not a given, and I don't want to make it sound easy because it wasn't. We spent the better part of a year in couples therapy. We had nights that were terrible. We had conversations that I would not wish on anyone. There were moments when I thought we wouldn't make it, not because of Marcus, not even because of the secret she'd kept, but because we had to rebuild an entire language with each other. We had to learn how to say the true things, even when the true things were hard. We did it. We're still doing it. Rachel's neurological condition has not progressed. She sees her doctor every 6 months. Some days she's afraid. Most days she isn't. She walks in the evenings still, and now I walk with her. Avery, who knows none of this except that her parents went through a hard time and came out the other side, just turned 10. She is still obsessed with horses. She recently started writing her own graphic novel about a girl who can communicate with animals. It is, objectively, the best thing I have ever read. I think about that Wednesday afternoon a lot. The couch cushion. The phone. The wrong passcode and then the right one. I think about how close I came to handling it differently. To storming upstairs and blowing everything apart before I had enough information to understand what I was actually looking at. I think about how a secret and a lie can look identical from the outside, and how understanding the difference can be the only thing that matters. I don't have a clean moral for you. Life doesn't really work that way. But I'll tell you this, the loneliest thing in the world is standing next to someone you love and not letting them see you. And the bravest thing in the world might just be letting yourself be seen, even when you're afraid of what they'll do with what they find. Rachel figured that out the hard way. So did I. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories coming, and some of them will stay with you for a long time.